Hey, Ignite, thank you again for allowing me back in your house. I hope you guys are having a great group already, and I know this study is going to make it even better. Man, chapter 1 was so good, and as we go into chapter 2, we do kind of have to suspend some of our disbelief. The ending of chapter 1 is that God sends a giant fish to swallow Jonah. Now, most people think this was a whale because of the anatomy of a whale seems to contribute to the fact that a human possibly could live there for a little while, but we don't know what kind of beast out of the sea this was. This could be an animal that's extinct now. Somehow God kind of reached into the fabric of physics and natural law and changed it for his prophet. And most certainly he can do that. And the entirety of the chapter that we're about to look at, Jonah is in the belly of this fish. I can't imagine what it would be like to be him. But before we dive into this story today, I want you to talk a little bit about fishing. Hopefully most of you have been fishing. And if some of you have not, you can share that. But I want to know, what's the biggest fish you ever caught? Now, don't give me a fish story about, it was as big as a house and you fought for it for 10 days. I don't want any of that mess. Legitimately, what's the biggest fish that you caught? I've never had an exceptional catch myself. I had a wonderful neighbor. His name was Dr. Dover. He was the pediatrician in Martin County. He was my next door neighbor, and he was a big fisherman and an avid huntsman as well. And so he would take me and Chris fishing. And there are definitely some times where I caught, a trout or something, yay big. For me, it was more about quantity over quality because I didn't care. If I caught something, it was a really, really good day. But some of you maybe have a real fish story. Share it, talk about it, take a couple minutes and just talking through your group. And I'll see you in a moment as we look at Jonah inside the belly of the giant fish. Hey guys, thanks for having me back. Listen, I hope that those icebreakers were really, really good. If anybody caught something gigantic, of course, the only way to really verify that is you need to show it. If you want to put something up on Ignite's page or share something on Instagram, we'd love to see your big fish pictures of you, showing this mammoth thing that you caught. That would be actually really, really amazing. Now, I want to say something before we even dive into the discussion for this first part of the prayer of Jonah and the belly of the fish. If you haven't had a second as a group to really read through this whole chapter, go ahead and pause me right now before we get into the question and do that. The beautiful thing about this book is each chapter is so short, you can really kind of get the whole breadth of it, and I think it makes the discussion way better for you to do that. So I don't feel bad. Pause me if you need to. 3, 2, 1. Okay, if you're still with me, I'm going to assume you had already read it and you didn't need to pause. If you did, just pause me and come back. Welcome back. The first part of this prayer is really interesting to me. We have Jonah calling out from the belly of the whale. He is in a very, very desperate situation. I mean, he's in a place where there is a large certainty that he very well might die here. I mean, just imagine being in the belly of a fish, the smells, the sounds, the certainty that you are hundreds, if not thousands of feet below water. Like if the whale ejects you, or if the fish ejects you out of its mouth while it's swimming, you're not going to make it. There's no escape from this prison. In the way that Jonah describes this, he says, I'm calling out to you, God, from the belly of Sheol. And Sheol is a Hebrew word of from death. So he's saying, instead of going through the valley of death, I'm in the belly of death. I'm calling out to you in this place where there's a large chance I'm going to die. And yeah, what's interesting in verse 3 is he says, but I know that you put me there. Like your waves and your billows are the things that come over me. Like Jonah starts his prayer with the realization that even though he's in a desperate situation, he knows that God put him there. Have you ever had a time in your life where you felt like you were in the belly of Sheol or the valley of death, where you're in this place where if there is a place that God can't hear me, I'm there right now. I'm so closed off. I'm so dark. I'm so depressed. I'm so in doubt and fear. I'm so sinful. God can't hear me. If you've ever had a time like that, I'd love for you to be real with your group and kind of share that time, because there are things we can learn in the belly of Sheol that really can impact our spiritual life. Those valleys of death, God allows those to happen because often he reveals himself in those places in different ways than he can in any other place. So take a second with your group and be real with each other and say, these were times where I felt closed off from God and I wondered, could God even hear my prayers? And then for your second question, guys, why does it sometimes take desperate situations for us to turn to God? Why does it take those foxhole moments? They say there's no atheist in a foxhole. Why does it take those moments sometimes for God to get our attention? And if you've ever had a moment where you were placed in a desperate situation and you all of a sudden started praying more, reading more, fasting more, seeking God's face more, share that with your group, because often one of the ways that God wakes us up from our routine is to put us into a situation that's bigger than ourselves. And in those situations, he always shows up and he is there for our rescue. Take a second and I'll see you in a moment. Hey guys, again, hope there was some great discussion there. Man, this prayer is really, really powerful. As we see Jonah in this situation where he's in the belly of this fish and now he's praying to God, he's describing what he's going through, and he really describes in great detail, this feeling of being under the water and having this moment where he's certain he's going to die, and of course, he's not dead. He's there in this fish, and that's a hard place. But he really describes that there were so many opportunities for him to consider, what God should I call out to for rescue? What things should I be looking to save us? And in the moment that Jonah's at, he's in this very, very special place where he realizes there's nothing else in all of creation that could save me from the wind, from the waves, from drowning, from death, than the true and only God. And in this middle section here, he really starts to talk a little bit about idols. And, when Jonah was on the boat, he was confident that he could outrun God. There were other things he was looking to. In our own life, in the midst of our work and our home and play and entertainment and just all the things that we surround ourselves with, the truth is, sometimes we're looking to things other than God for our peace, for our priority, for our hope, for our joy. We're looking at idols. Now, our idols aren't made of steel and stone. The idols of Jonas, they were a little different. But our idols are just as powerful and just as real in our life. And so what I want you to do as we kind of dive into this aspect where Jonah's in this place where he's realizing there's only one true God that can rescue me. These idols, they have nothing to offer me. What are some of the modern day idols that we struggle with? What are some of the modern idols that you struggle with? And they can be seemingly good things. But just take a second and in your group, list out what are some of those things that we put our hope and our faith and our trust in. If we only had these things, then we would have a full life. And after you've done that, that's kind of a relatively quick question as you list those things out. Like, what things do those idols cause us to miss from the one and true God? I'll give you one big one, for instance. If your family becomes your idol and they're your source of joy, they're your source of peace, they're your source of hope, what happens when things break down in your marriage? What happens when a kid rebels? What blessings do you miss when you put something that is not God in the place of a true and only God? Because our God, he's the only one that can give the things that a God can truly give. So take a second, discuss what are the idols we deal with, and where do these idols lead us if we don't put our faith and trust in the true and only God. Hey guys, as we get into the end of this prayer, man, I love the way this prayer finishes. And so, take a second and you can look at it again after you cut me off, because this is powerful. Like, he's calling out to God. He's recognizing the fact that he was going to drown. The waves are crashing over him. He's sinking down. The seaweed is brushing by his face. He describes this place where he is entering into death. And then God does send this fish to come and rescue him. Again, probably not the vehicle of salvation that he would have chosen for himself, but a powerful one nonetheless. And in the midst of this moment inside the fish, and he's calling out to God, he's recognizing like salvation comes from the Lord. And he goes into that final part of his prayer with like, I'm so thankful. I didn't deserve to be saved. The truth is, God told me to do something. I knew I had the ability to do it, and I ran from him. I disobeyed him. I rebelled against him. I deserved to die. But God in his grace and his mercy has saved me, and I'm so thankful. As you look at that last line of his prayer, he's recognizing where salvation's come from. He has a thankful spirit, but then it's also an admission that he's going to change his life. Jonah says, I'm going to keep my vows. Apparently, before this book came about, Jonah as a prophet, he had promised God, hey, when you give me a message, I will deliver it. He almost had this covenant relationship with God, like, if you'll use me to be a vehicle of your word, I'm going to be willing to do that. And he broke his vow. He broke his promise. And so he's reassuring God, hey, I realize you saved me. I'm thankful for that. And I'm going to do the thing that you've called me to do. The truth is, in our own life, salvation comes from the Lord. So what I wanted you to talk about first is, how did the whole fish experience really change Jonah's perspective? Like, God sent him to a place he didn't want to go. He sent him to a people that he, hates and fears. How did this situation with the fish and being rescued, how did it change his perspective? How did it change the direction of Jonah's life? And then following up that question, I want to make it real for you as we apply this. What are the things that God is calling you to do that have changed your life? As a Christian, we should look different. We should think different. We should sound different. We should live differently because of our relationship with Jesus. So since becoming a Christian, what are some ways that God has changed your direction in your life? And the truth is, if you can't think of anything, that's something you should discuss with your group as well, because anytime we encounter God, He changes us forever. I'll see you guys next week. It's going to be an amazing story as we finally see Jonah go into Nineveh. But really apply this. What did God do to change Jonah's direction? And what's he doing to change your direction as a group as well?